Emily and Jake were overjoyed when their daughter Lily was born. The gentle cooing of their newborn filled their tiny apartment with hope, yet unknown to them. Something ancient and restless was about to invade their lives, a presence that made every heartbeat quicken with dread. From the moment Lily was born, the couple was meticulous. They left nothing to chance, installing a state-of-the-art baby monitor in the nursery, a device that promised them the peace of mind they craved. In the beginning, the monitor was nothing more than a lifeline to a new world of parenthood, a modern marvel, ensuring that every moment of Lily's sleep was observed. One cool autumn evening, as Emily was tending to Lily's bedtime routine, she noticed something odd on the monitor's audio feed. At first, there was only a low, persistent static, the kind one might expect in an old radio. But as she listened more intently, the static seemed to twist into soft, almost musical murmurs, dismissing it as interference. Emily attributed it to the many electronic devices in their apartment. That night, just as the clock ticked past midnight, Emily heard it clearly, a whisper that slithered into her consciousness. "She's so beautiful, don't let them take her." It was as if the sound was coming from the walls themselves. Her heart hammered, and she sat frozen by the monitor, convinced it was a glitch. She told herself it must be a trick of her tired mind. Yet, in the days that followed, the phenomenon became impossible to ignore. The whispers returned with increasing frequency, now interlaced with eerie giggles that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The words seemed laden with melancholic urgency, a warning from forgotten soul. Despite her mounting fear, Emily kept the experience to herself, unwilling to alarm Jake, who was already burdened with the demands of a newborn. One particular night, the monitor betrayed a secret. Emily was half asleep when she jolted awake, drawn by a noise that was distinctly not Lily's soft breathing. Groping for the monitor, she switched the view to video mode. On the screen, a dark, vague shape loomed over the crib. The figure's outline was indistinct, a silhouette, or perhaps just a trick of the light, but it sent a jolt of terror down her spine. She whispered, "Jake, Jake, wake up." Her voice was barely audible, choked by panic. She ran out of the nursery to find her husband, who, when he saw the monitor, brushed off her alarm with a tired smile. "It's just a night light reflecting weird shadows," he said. But the memory of that faceless figure haunted her all through the night. In the weeks that followed, the monitor's whispers intensified. Emily found herself lying awake long into the night, straining her ears to the next sinister utterance. The baby monitor, once a symbol of safety, had transformed into a portal for something unknown and disturbing. One evening, as a storm raged outside, the house was plunged into darkness by a power outage. With only a flickering candle to light the room, Emily cradled Lily in her arms. In the silence that enveloped the home, a faint voice echoed from the baby monitor she had managed to charge earlier. "She belongs to me," it intoned in a voice that dripped with sorrow and menace. The sound was barely audible, but it carried a weight of despair that made Emily shudder. She confided in a friend, a neighbor with a keen interest in the paranormal, who suggested that the house might be haunted by a spirit with unfinished business. Though skeptical at first, Emily couldn't deny the growing evidence. The whisper seemed to carry the cadence of mother's lament, and sometimes, in the dead of night, Lily would stir as if in recognition of something unseen. Unable to endure the torment alone, Emily convinced Jake to let her contact a paranormal investigator. The investigator, a reserved and serious man named Mr. Harris, arrived one rainy afternoon with a calm demeanor that belied the intensity of his work. His eyes, dark and observant, took in every detail of the nursery and the rest of the house. After setting up his equipment, a medley of recorders, EMF meters, and infrared cameras, Mr. Harris explained, "Your home has a history. Decades ago, a woman lived here, a new mother whose baby died under mysterious circumstances. It appears that her spirit is drawn to this room, perhaps longing to reclaim what she lost." The revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. The whispers were not random. They were the echoes of sorrowful past, a spectral longing that defied logic. The investigator's words filled the room with an oppressive sadness, and Emily began to see the house in a new, grim light. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind seemed to carry the lament of the ghostly mother. Despite Mr. Harris's assurances that the spirit was not overtly malevolent, the fear in Emily's eyes was unmistakable. That night, as a heavy rain battered the windows, she and Jake lay awake, determined to protect Lily from whatever lay in the shadows. In a desperate bid for safety, they left the baby monitor running as a last vigil. At the stroke of midnight, the monitor crackled to life once more. The whispers were louder than ever, interspersed with agonized sobs and eerie lullaby that chilled the blood. Emily, paralyzed by fear, watched as the monitor screen shimmered and a ghostly image of a woman appeared. The spectral figure, dressed in an old-fashioned nightgown, reached out toward the camera with a pleading expression. "Help me, let her be," the spirit whispered, her voice trembling with despair. In that moment, Emily knew that the ghostly mother was not a monster. It was a broken soul, desperate for the love and acceptance that she had been denied in life. But for Jake, the terror was too much to bear. Believing the phenomenon to be a harbinger of danger, he made a decision without consulting Emily. They must leave the house immediately. In the cold light of dawn, with Lily bundled in blankets and the monitor's eerie silence lingering in their ears, they packed up their lives and fled the only home Lily had ever known. They moved far away, to a house that felt safe and familiar. Yet, even in their new home, the memory of the whispers haunted them. On quiet nights, when the wind howled and shadows danced in the corners of the room, Emily would sometimes swear she heard that faint, sorrowful voice calling out in the darkness. And though the baby monitor never betrayed any strange signals again, the emotional scar remained, a constant reminder that sometimes the past never truly leaves U.S. Karen had always dreamed of a fresh start. After a painful divorce, she moved into an old, charming house in the suburbs with her son, Tommy. The house was a century-old relic, filled with creaks, dusty corners, and a lingering sense of mystery. It was everything Karen needed to leave behind her troubled past and create a safe haven for her imaginative, introspective 6-year-old. Tommy, with his wide, curious eyes, took to the house immediately. He claimed to hear things, a whisper from the walls, soft giggles in the dead of night, and spoke often about the boy in the closet. At first, Karen dismissed these claims as a product of an active imagination fueled by fairy tales and bedtime stories. After all, children often conjure up imaginary friends to cope with change. However, it wasn't long before subtle, unnerving signs began to manifest. In the early days, Karen noticed that Tommy's closet door was never securely closed, despite her constant reminders. Each morning, she found it ajar, as if something had been in there and then left it open in haste. Toys were inexplicably rearranged. A stuffed bear placed in a position it had never occupied before, and a favorite toy truck turned upside down. One evening, after Tommy had been tucked into bed, Karen heard a muffled sound from the direction of his room. With a growing sense of unease, she approached the closed door. The silence was heavy, and for a moment, she could have sworn she heard a faint giggle coming from the shadows. Brushing it off as her mind playing tricks, she closed the door and went back to the kitchen. A few nights later, the house was draped in an unusual quiet that made every sound seem amplified. Karen was awakened by a blood-curdling scream. Heart pounding, she bolted to Tommy's room. There, she found him huddled in a corner, eyes wide with terror. "Mommy, the boy came out," he cried, his voice trembling as he pointed toward the closet. Karen's heart raced as she slowly approached the closet door. With a trembling hand, she opened it, half expecting to see a ragged, ghostly figure standing inside. But there was nothing, only the same old clothes and a scattering of forgotten toys. Tommy, however, was inconsolable, insisting that he'd seen a boy with a pale face and hollow eyes, a boy who had been watching him from the shadows. That night, Karen barely slept. Every creak in the old house, every whisper wind, set her nerves on edge. She began to worry that the house's history might be more sinister than she had imagined. After some research at the local library and interviews with longtime residents, she discovered that the house had once belonged to a family who had suffered an unspeakable tragedy. A young boy, much like Tommy, had vanished mysteriously, and his disappearance had never been solved. The closet had been rumored to be his hiding place, a place where his cries for help had once echoed. As the weeks passed, the eerie occurrences escalated. Tommy would leave drawings behind, sketches of a ghostly boy with sorrowful eyes peeking from a darkened closet. Every night, as the clock neared bedtime, the door of his closet would creak open by itself, and faint, eerie laughter could be heard in the background. Karen began to document these events, her journal filling with desperate notes and frantic sketches of the unsettling phenomena. Desperate for answers and solution, Karen reached out to a renowned medium named Lila. Lila was a woman of quiet demeanor and mysterious eyes, known for her ability to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. During a tense session in the dim light of Tommy's room, Lila sensed a palpable presence. "This is an imaginary friend, Karen," she whispered. "There is a spirit here, a lost soul trapped in the confines of his home. The energy here is raw and sorrowful." Lila explained that the spirit of the missing boy was restless, caught between the realms of the living and the dead. His presence was not inherently evil, but his confusion and sorrow could be dangerous, especially for a vulnerable child like Tommy. "It's as if he's trying to reach out, to be seen and understood," Lila said softly, but his way of communication is anything but gentle. In the following days, the haunting became almost unbearable. Tommy's dreams turned into nightmares. He would wake in the middle of the night, trembling and muttering about the boy in the closet. Karen found herself questioning every creak, every shadow. The once warm corners of the house were now shrouded in a chilling sense of foreboding. One particularly harrowing evening, after a long day of unexplained occurrences, Karen decided to spend the night in Tommy's room. She sat in a chair by the bed, keeping a watchful eye on the closet door. The room was suffused with the dim glow of a nightlight, but even that small source of comfort couldn't push back the encroaching darkness. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the closet door slowly creaked open. Karen's heart pounded as she saw the dark recess of the closet stretch out like a yawning void. Then, a soft sound, almost imperceptible, reached her ears. It was the sound of a child's laugh, gentle yet eerie, echoing in the silence. "It's just the wind," she tried to reassure herself, but the voice carried an unmistakable tone of longing and despair. In that moment, Tommy stirred, his eyes fluttering open as if he'd sensed the presence too. He reached out toward the dark interior, whispering, "He's here, Mommy. He's here with me." Karen's heart ached with the intensity of his fear, and she wrapped him in a protective embrace. The room felt colder than ever, as if the very air were saturated with sorrow. Karen knew she couldn't let the spirit linger indefinitely. With the help of Lila, she arranged for a cleansing of the house. On a chilly, rain-soaked afternoon, Lila arrived with a bundle of sage and other ritualistic tools. In a solemn ceremony that lasted several hours, Lila moved from room to room, reciting incantations and waving the smoke-filled sage to purify the space. The process was deeply unsettling, and at one point, the power of the ritual seemed to summon the spirit. In the midst of the ceremony, the closet door burst open, and for a fleeting moment, Karen saw the faint image of a small, gaunt boy with eyes that held centuries of sorrow. The child's gaze locked with hers, a silent plea for understanding. And then he vanished, leaving behind a palpable emptiness. After the ritual, the activity in the house subsided. The closet door remained shut at night, and the rearranged toys went back to their original places. Tommy, though still visibly anxious, began to smile again as the oppressive atmosphere lifted. However, even with the haunting receding, Karen could never shake the memory of that sorrowful face. In quiet moments, when the house was silent, she would catch a glimpse of him in the mirror or hear his whisper in the dark. Years later, when Tommy was older and the nightmares had softened into distant memories, he would still murmur about the boy when he thought no one was listening. His drawings, filled with cryptic symbols and forlorn faces, remained as a haunting testament to those early days. Karen often wondered if the spirit had ever truly left, or if he had merely faded into the background of a house that had once been full of life and laughter. The unresolved mystery of the missing boy would forever linger in the corners of that old home, a secret that refused to be forgotten. The Patterson family had always prided themselves on their close-knit, happy home. In a quiet cul-de-sac, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson raised their twin daughters, Ava and Bella, in what seemed like an idyllic setting. The twins were inseparable, sharing secrets and dreams in a world that only they could understand. Their parents, though busy with work and life's myriad responsibilities, made every effort to create an atmosphere of warmth and security. But in the soft glow of twilight, when the world outside the Patterson household fell into slumber, something sinister began to stir. It started subtly, one crisp fall evening. While the family was gathered for dinner, Ava mentioned something that made Mrs. Patterson's skin crawl. "There's a man," Ava said in a quiet, almost conspiratorial tone, "a man who stands at our window at night." Bella, usually the quieter of the two, nodded solemnly, adding, "He always smiles. But it's not a happy smile. It's like he knows something terrible." Mrs. Patterson exchanged a worried glance with her husband. Their initial thought was that the girls were playing imaginative games, a byproduct of watching too many spooky movies or reading scary stories. Yet, there was an intensity in the twins' voices that was impossible to dismiss. That night, with a sense of apprehension, they checked the windows. The world outside was cloaked in darkness, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But deep within the silent night, something lurked in the shadows, unseen by human eyes. The following day, Mr. Patterson reviewed the footage from their recently installed security system. As he watched the recorded video of the twins' room from the previous night, his eyes widened in disbelief. There at the window was a tall, thin figure. The man's face was partially obscured by darkness, but his smile was unmistakable, a grin that stretched too wide, full of eerie, unspoken secrets. When Mr. Patterson rewound the footage, the figure was seen standing for only a few seconds before disappearing behind a tree in the backyard. Shaken to his core, Mr. Patterson discussed the incident with his wife. "It's got to be a prank or a trick of the light," he tried to convince her, but his tone betrayed a deeper uncertainty. As the nights wore on, more sightings were reported. The security cameras would capture fleeting images, a glimpse of a figure at the window, a soft laugh carried on the wind, and the twins would wake up crying, insisting that the smiling man was getting closer each time. Mrs. Patterson found herself waking in the middle of the night, drawn by the sound of scratching. One fateful night, as a storm raged outside, she crept into the twins' room to discover the source of the noise. There, in the dim light of the nightlight, was an awful sight. The window was scratched deeply, as if by long, bony fingernails, each mark etching a silent warning. The glass was marred by dozens of tiny cuts, reminiscent of the desperate clawing of a man driven by an unexplainable force. Terrified, she quickly woke the twins, whose wide, terrified eyes confirmed that their fears were real. "He's coming for us," Bella whispered in a trembling voice. The family huddled together as the sound of the rain mingled with the soft, sinister tapping on the glass. In the days that followed, the Pattersons took every precaution they could imagine. Additional locks were installed on every door and window, and extra cameras were placed around the house. Yet, despite all these measures, the smiling man's presence seemed to linger like a stubborn shadow. The footage, when reviewed, no longer showed the figure, as if he had learned to hide from the electronic eyes of the home. But the twins' accounts, filled with vivid details of the man's eerie smile and cold, empty eyes, could not be discounted. Mr. Patterson contacted local authorities, who investigated the neighborhood. Rumors began to circulate about an unsettled case from years past, a man who had vanished under mysterious circumstances after being reported in the area. Some said he was a drifter. Others whispered about darker secrets involving the local asylum, but no definitive answers emerged. The mystery deepened, feeding on the family's growing terror. One night, when the tension was nearly unbearable, Mrs. Patterson awoke to the sound of soft footsteps on the porch. Her heart pounded as she peered through curtains. There, standing directly opposite the twins' bedroom window, was the smiling man. His face was illuminated by the cold light of a passing car, and for a moment his eyes met hers. In that brief, unspoken exchange, she felt as if the man was not merely a ghostly intruder, but an omen of something far more sinister. Terrified, she crept back to the twins' room and gathered the girls in her arms. As she whispered reassurances, The scratching resumed, more insistent and desperate than ever before. In the midst of her frantic attempt to calm her daughters, the power suddenly went out, plunging the house into suffocating darkness. The only light came from sporadic lightning flashes that revealed fleeting images of the smiling man, his silhouette merging with a violent burst of light. By dawn, the Patterson family had made a heart-wrenching decision. The house, once a sanctuary of comfort, had become a prison of fear and despair. With heavy hearts and tear-streaked faces, they packed what little belongings they could salvage and fled the neighborhood. The smiling man had claimed his place in their nightmares, and there was no returning to the life they once knew. In their new home, far away from that cursed neighborhood, the Pattersons attempted to rebuild their lives. Yet, every so often during long, sleepless nights, Ava would awaken with a start, whispering in a voice barely audible, "He's still watching, waiting at the window." The echoes of the past had a way of resurfacing, no matter how far one ran. Years later, as the family had settled into a semblance of normalcy, Ava admitted in a hushed conversation that she still dreamed of the smiling man he never left. She confided to her therapist, her eyes distant and troubled. "He's just waiting for me to come back." Bella, now a few years older, had learned to mask her fear with humor, but her eyes would sometimes betray a deep-seated anxiety. The Patterson home, though blessed and renovated to exorcise its dark past, carried an undercurrent of unresolved terror, a reminder that some presences refused to be laid to rest. As these three stories reveal, true parenting horrors are not always the stuff of urban legends or fictional nightmares. They are raw, visceral experiences that leave lasting imprints on the hearts and minds of those who endure them. Whether it was a mournful whisper of a desperate spirit, the anguished cries of a long-lost child, or the sinister smile of a figure watching from the window, each haunting left its mark, a scar that time could never fully erase. For Emily and Jake, the spectral presence in the nursery was a reminder that every home has a history, a tapestry woven with sorrow, loss, and unfulfilled longing. The baby monitor, a seemingly innocuous device, became a conduit for a mother's anguish from beyond the grave. Lily, though innocent, was inadvertently caught in the crossfire of unresolved grief. And while the couple eventually sought solace in a new beginning, the echoes of that night continued to haunt their dreams, whispering a timeless warning. Some wounds never heal. For Karen and Tommy, the missing boy in the closet was not just a ghostly apparition, but a living memory of a tragedy that had once shattered a family. The small, spectral figure represented the vulnerability of childhood, the fragility of life, and the desperate need for closure. In the silence of that old house, every creak and every shadow became a reminder of the darkness that can reside in the most unexpected places. The attempted cleansing, while momentarily effective, could not erase the deep imprint of the sorrow that had been inflicted upon a little boy's innocent mind. And for the Patterson family, the smiling man at the window was a manifestation of a broader, more insidious evil, a reminder that not every haunting is tied to a single moment in time, but rather to a chain of events that ripple through generations. The sinister figure, whose eyes glowed with an inexplicable malice, symbolized the inescapable nature of fear. His presence was an ever-present shadow, lurking in the corners of their lives, a constant reminder that sometimes the most frightening monsters are those that come not from the outside, but from within our own memories. Each story leaves us with a lingering question. What is the true nature of these disturbances? Are they merely echoes of the past, restless spirits trapped by their own tragedies? Or do they represent a deeper, darker force, one that thrives on the fears and vulnerabilities of those it haunts? There is no simple answer. In every creak of floorboard and every whisper in the dark, there's a story waiting to be told, a story of love lost, of innocence betrayed, and the relentless march of time that refuses to erase the scars of our past. As time marches on, the memories of these haunting experiences become part of the tapestry of the family's lives. They serve as a cautionary tale for new parents, a reminder that even in the safety of one's home, there can be shadows that lurk, waiting for the right moment to remind you of the terrors hidden in plain sight. For some, these memories evolve into cherished, albeit dark, family legends, stories shared around flickering campfires or whispered during quiet family gatherings. For others, the specters remain a source of unending anxiety, a permanent, unseen guest that follows them wherever they go. In the end, these stories serve as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the fear, despite the terror, each parent found the strength to move forward. They built new lives, carved out new spaces for hope, and in doing so, honored the memory of those who could not find peace. Yet, in the quiet moments of reflection, they can't help but wonder the darkness might one day find its way back into their lives. In these 3 disturbing true parenting horror stories, what begins as an ordinary glimpse into the trials of parenthood transforms into a journey through the unknown, a journey where love and terror collide, and the past refuses to be forgotten, whether it was through the haunting whispers of a baby monitor, the mysterious presence lurking in a closet, or the ever-watchful smiling man at the window. Each story reveals that even in the sanctity of home, some shadows are destined to linger. The experiences of Emily, Karen, and the Patterson family remind us that the line between reality and the supernatural is perilously thin. Their lives were forever altered by the inexplicable forces they encountered. A testament to the fact that sometimes the most disturbing horrors are not the ones we create in our imaginations, but those that find us when we are most vulnerable. And so, as we close this chronicle of unsettling truths, we are left with a lingering question. When you tuck your child in at night, are you truly alone, or do the echoes of forgotten past quietly watch over you?